Hello everyone, welcome to today's video. In this video we will be talking about the SDLC models part 2, and here we will be covering the rapid application development model. So in my previous video we talked about the classical waterfall model, and we also talked about what are the advantages and disadvantages of the same. Now this rapid application, before we move ahead with rapid application development or RAD, we would like to discuss why is it required. So basically this is RAD, or the rapid application development, is also a software development life cycle model like the previous one which we have discussed, that is the waterfall model, and it uses automated tools and techniques to improve the development process, and is basically a combination of the incremental and iterative model. So by incremental, it means that we will release the software or the project in a phase-wise manner, and iterative means that if we have any problems associated with any of the stages, we can immediately go back to that particular stage and correct it. So talking about RAD, instead of relying on the individual skills for hand designing and coding, RAD makes use of automated design and coding, which will give stability to the process. So here there is another concept which is introduced, that is automated designing of the components or of the project. So which will and designing and of course coding, which will give stability to the project. So when we are talking about RAD, essentially we have to understand that it is more capable than the traditional approaches. Okay, so traditional approach we have discussed so far, the waterfall model, and that model has several shortcomings which we will see how it is overcome or how we can take care of it using the RAD model. So it gives stability to the entire process. Moreover, it involves, since we are talking about an automatic designing process or coding, it makes use of computer assisted software engineering tools. So these are also known as case tools and techniques, and it helps us to generate the design as well as the related code using various code generators and prototyping tools. Okay, so case tools is an entirely different topic, and we will not go deep into it for us as of now. In order to understand what does this what these tools do is basically they have certain code generators, some design generators, which will be helping us to automatically generate the design as well as code and generate a certain prototype of the project. Now talking about why do we have to go for this model. Okay, so the main question is why RAD is used. So if we are using the traditional development lifecycle model, it involves five primary different stages, which was requirement analysis and gathering. So let me write it down: requirement analysis and requirement gathering and analysis. So requirement gathering and analysis, which will give rise to the SRS. Then in the second step we have the design phase, in which we have a DDS, and from the DDS we will be taking the best possible design. The third one is the coding. The fourth step is testing as well as system integration, and the fifth one is deployment. And finally, the entire life cycle model ends with maintenance. So these are the steps which are involved in our conventional SDLC. Now, once these requirements are frozen, that means whenever we get a project, the requirements are analyzed, and once these requirements are fixed, then only the coding process starts after the design is over. And once the coding is completed, then only the testing will start, followed by the deployment and so on. So it has a definite entry and exit criteria for each of the phases, and only after the exit criteria is met, that particular stage gets completed and it can enter into the next step. That means it is a linear flow of operations. However, it becomes a long wait for the customer to be able to see the final product, because it has to make sure that all the steps are completed, and only at this particular stage the customer would be able to see something concrete for their project. So it is a long wait for the customer in order to see their project being developed, and it is quite possible that by the time the product is developed, the customer's business needs could change, or he might need some additional features into his already existing project. Now, in order to fix that, or in order to change the business entire design of that particular process, it is again a long process which will start from the first step. So in order to overcome such challenges, some solutions were proposed which included the spiral model and the Rad model, among others. So spiral model, we will be discussing it in our subsequent sessions. However, for this session we will be talking about Rad model. Okay, so this model will start with gathering and analyzing the user requirements, and in the next step the designing the solution is carried out. So, and a prototype of the solution is developed, and this prototype, so once the design is completed, it will be generating a prototype, and this prototype will be validated by the customer, and once the customer validates it, it can go ahead with the uh, further development. The users will basically be testing, or the customers will be testing this prototype, and they will provide their reviews and suggest the changes if there are any. So basically we simply create a dummy of the project or a working prototype of the project, and we will send it to the customer for review. In between, before executing these phases, so these phases will not be executed initially, and once the customer gives a positive feedback that okay, he is satisfied, then only it is further carried out in order to transform it into a bigger model. So what happens here is that the customer does not have to wait for long in order to see how his project would look like. Also, there are other stages which we will be discussing, the phases of the Rad model, which will actually be focusing on how the rigidity of the phases is basically overridden in this case. Okay, so let us first check the different phases of the Rad model. So, phases of Rad model. This also has several steps which is occurring in a linear manner. However, they have different names associated with it, and it has different functionalities. Okay, so the first step is business modeling. So the first step involved in Rad is business modeling. Then we have data modeling. The third step is process modeling. The fourth one is application generation. Application generation. And the third one, the last and the final step is testing and turnover. So these are the 5 different steps or 5 different phases in which the Rad model would work. So let us first focus on the first one. The first one is the business modeling. So when uh, the phase starts, that means the business modeling. In this phase, the business functions and the product scope are decided during various meetings between the requirement planning team and the client team. So this stage is similar to the conventional software requirement gathering and analysis stage in the conventional waterfall model. However, here there would be several teams involved during the planning stage. And essentially there will be a planning team involved. So here the role of planning team is high. There is a high impact of this particular team in this phase, where this planning team will be interacting with the client team in order to sort out the different business functions, what will be the functionalities as well as what would be the scope of that particular project, and it will give an entire idea about how the project would look like. Here there are no such fact, or there are no such documents like SRS document or planning document involved, but they will definitely have a documentation of the entire requirements which would be needed by the project, and they will model the entire business. So here the term business is involved instead of simply requirements or hardware or software requirement. So instead of this hardware or software requirement, the planning team will be planning out the business. That means the scope and the different functions that particular phase would be capable of uh, handling. Okay, the next one is the data modeling, and here all the information which is derived from the business modeling is analyzed and separated into different data elements important from the for the business. So here the data elements are identified. That means what will be the data which would be utilized for this particular project, that would be separated from the entire requirements which have been planned out in the business modeling phase. The third one is the process modeling. So in this phase we have now in the previous phase we have already sorted out the data elements. Here all the data objects gathered in the process modeling phase are transformed into required useful information. That means the transformation of this entire what do you call that of the entire information in terms of data is basically um, transformed into useful information in terms of process. That means the data object will set its sets defined in the data modeling phase are converted to establish the business information flow. If in some certain situations if we have to model the data, that means if we are considering the flow of data from one process to another, how that flow will occur, and what is the objective of that particular data flow, and what is the objective of that functionality, everything is transformed or everything is converted into useful information related to the project. And the process model for any changes or enhancement to the data object sets is defined in this particular phase. Okay, so if we need any changes as well, then also we can incorporate or we can model it in this particular phase. Now the third one, the fourth step is application generation. So here basically the actual implementation takes place. So actual implementation, or whatever we say it as the coding phase, so that phase or development starts in this particular phase, and this is done by using automated tools to convert process and data models into actual prototypes. So we already talked about case tools. So case tools role come in this particular step where where the data and the process they are collectively analyzed, and the processes are basically converted into suitable prototypes using the code generators. The fifth and the important step is testing and turnover. The overall testing time is reduced in the Rad model as the prototypes are independently tested during every iteration. However, if we are considering the data flow and interfaces between all the components, they need to be thoroughly tested with complete test coverage. Okay, and once this testing and turnover is done, this testing and turnover basically it will reduce the risks. It will also reduce the risk of any major issues, because at every iteration, that means every time a prototype is generated and basically it is given to the customer in order to give their feedback and review. The risks are identified at that stage itself. So hence it is a better basically a better version, because it also do not involve much of manual labor. That means manual coding and manual design generation is not there. It is done by automated tools. So hence the risk involved in the implementation or application generation is also very low. Now talking about the essential aspects of Rad. So if we are considering some essential aspects, just one second, yes. If we are considering some essential aspects, so there are several things which we need to consider while we are handling a Rad model. Okay, so first is the methodology. Okay, so first one is the methodology. So if we are considering the methodology, it includes a list of important fundamentals which are used to ensure fast delivery of a high quality product. Okay, the first point under methodology which we have to remember is that it makes use of prototypes, or it will use prototypes. It uses prototypes, something which which itself has generated, and that prototype can be scaled up to the final product. Okay, and it will use workshops rather than interviews to gather the requirements. So it uses workshops where open discussion takes place rather than interviews where there is a chance that some information might have been skipped by the interviewer. Then interviews for information gathering. So this is an essential step, because when there is a one-to-one communication or uh, a discussion in a smaller group, lesser number of ideas or lesser number of suggestions are generated. However, if there is a workshop which has been conducted regarding the same, then a wider range of ideas get exchanged. So for information gathering, it is the best possible one of the best possible options, and it uses Rad uses this. So the next one that it uses in its methodology is a suitable set of case tools. So these case tools are computer assisted tools, and they will be helpful for generation of the design as well as generation of the codes, which will involve minimum human intervention, and hence has a greater chance of accuracy. And then it also involves a time boxed development process. So a time box development process basically is pertaining to a feasibility or a development process which is having a proper timeline associated with it, as well as a proper planning associated with it, and everything is documented. So even if we miss out on some events, we can actually find out um, which are the activities that has been missed out from the different process models, as well as from the different data models which have been generated. And it also provides a guideline for different products describing the risks. So it provides guideline for risks. Now risk analysis is one of the major steps which most of the software development lifecycle model do not take care of. However, Rad has that advantage in terms of risks, where it analyzes iteratively for each of the prototypes and do not rely upon only the final version of the product. Okay, the next one is the next important or the essential aspect is people. So talking about people, This model encourages high speed, high quality, and low cost. Cost is an important factor for each of the project or each software project, not only software project, each of the product which has been developed. So this cost, it is expected to be minimum in terms of software projects as well. And in order to achieve this, not only the high quality tools are required, but also people who are involved in the rad process should be highly skilled. So people should be highly motivated and talented, and they should not be involving any delays or solve any, they should be able to solve any problems that might affect the development process. And also using of the case tool set is not very easy, so the people who are handling the case tool should be experienced enough. Now there are other associated aspects of rad, like let me write it down, like the management, then the requirement planning team. So planning team is very important, because they will be setting the benchmark of that particular business. Then there should be also a construction SWAT team. So SWAT team is basically they are the skilled workers with advanced tools like case tools. Since it is an advanced tool set, so there is a requirement of the skilled laborers or skilled people in order to handle this particular tool set. And also there should be a workshop leader. Now this workshop leader, as already mentioned, that the requirement gathering takes place in a workshop type of an environment rather than an interview. And this workshop leader should be responsible of organizing and conducting joint requirement planning and joint application design workshops. So these are some of the essential aspects when rad is considered. Now moving ahead with the advantages of rad. So we have already discussed some of the advantages, but let us put it down in a more formal way. Advantages of rad. So the first advantage of rad is high speed. High speed. It is one of the fastest software development lifecycle models, as the model uses case tools to automate major processes of the rad lifecycle. The quick delivery of the product is possible, because most of the codes, most of the designs, it is generated using the case tools. Now it also enhances the quality of the product, so it develops high quality product. And how do they do it, or how does this model do it? Because it regularly involves users in the whole life cycle, and each prototype is reviewed by the user. That helps in identifying any major issues. So once the business modeling is done, it is sent, as already mentioned here. If you see in the data modeling, after the design, business modeling is done, that means the first step is done. Before it goes to the design, and before it goes to the data modeling stage, it is actually reviewed by the user once. So once the user reviews it, they are capable to identify any missing elements which might be there, and they can immediately report it in order to get it fixed. So at every iteration the user is involved, and this user would be able to give the feedback, which will help in order to enhance the quality of the product. Then the third one is basically it makes it easier for the users to suggest the changes and the SWAT team to incorporate them in the code, and it is very flexible for change. It is highly flexible for change. The fourth advantage related to this model is it is cost effective, because it uses fewer developers. So cost effective, and also most of the work is done by the case tools or case tool set. And the fifth And the last advantage related to this particular model is it helps to identify any risk factors. Identifies the risk factors. So we do not need to have a separate risk analysis phase. The risk factors are identified by the developers, by the generation, code generation, as well as the users when the prototypes are developed or when the prototypes are generated. Now the disadvantages of the Rad model. So if we are considering the disadvantages, disadvantages of Rad model. So the first and the primary disadvantage is that it is not suitable for all types of project. It suits small and medium sized projects. Medium sized projects. That means which involves a definite development time. So we can handle those kind of projects using this particular model. The second disadvantage is that it encourages a small team. That means around 2 to 6 developers. At the same time, it demands high quality and high speed in the developed product. So in order to achieve this, it is very crucial that all the members of the team should be highly skilled and familiar with the tools being used, which is not always very feasible that all the members of a particular team would be highly skilled. Okay, so it encourages a small team of workers or a small team of developers, and these developers essentially needs to be highly skilled, which becomes a challenge. So also there is too much dependency on the people involved in the Rad project. If one of them is not able to perform his or her task adequately, it might affect the product development, because this team of developers, since they are very small in number, the dependency is also higher on each other. And the third and one of the most important disadvantage is that it does not suit systems that cannot be broken down into modules. So only modular development is encouraged in this particular model. If we can break down a bigger project into smaller modules, only those kind of projects can be handled. That means an entire project at one go cannot be developed using the Rad model. It will initially develop one module and go on appending the other modules accordingly. So these are some of the disadvantages which are related to Rad. We have also discussed the advantages and some of the essential factors which are related to Rad, and we have also discussed the different phases of the Rad model. The primary use of this Rad model is that it do not have any fixed entry or exit criteria. That means here the entire project is separated out into different modules and different processes, and based on those processes, after it is approved by the user as well as the development team, only then it goes for the final development process. So this is all for the Rad model. We will be discussing some more SDLC models in our subsequent session. Thank you.